G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. Today I have the fun and unenviable task of trying to pick not an all-time best West Coast Eagles 22, but since 2000, okay? So combining a multitude of eras. I think in that time we've had 2 premiership teams, we've played in 4 grand finals, we've probably seen 3 rebuilds, we got the back end of the Ken Judge era, the post-06 rebuild, and of course the one we're currently in. So we've seen a whole lot in 24 seasons. And the limitation on me is obviously, I started watching football in about 2002, so I didn't feel super comfortable trying to shoehorn in players that I'd never actually seen play. So I'm going to give you my best 22 since 2000. That being said, let me know in the comments, I would love to have some insight, as to which players of the 90s would find their way into this team. I can think of some ideas, but I'd prefer to pick a team where I can actually speak with a degree of confidence. And it is still a little bit hard comparing different eras. And also, obviously, I remember the 2018 Premiership team a lot better than the 06 Premiership team, even though I did, see that whole thing. Now, the important thing here is to note as well, there are certain players who played into the post-2000 era, but their prime was undoubtedly in the 90s. So guys like Peter Matera and Glenn Jakovich, those guys are, possibly 2 of our top 3 to 5 all-time Eagles. But post-2000, I'm measuring it on post-2000 contribution, and I don't have these guys in the team. So I'm going to go through our best 22 and also come up with a few honourable mentions. So we'll start with the backline. So I've gone for the 2 key positional defenders of Darren Glass and Jeremy McGovern. So Darren Glass, who's the next best? Tom Barrass maybe, Eric McKenzie. Darren Glass was an absolute star. Not your typical or modern intercepting style defender. I think he was a little bit shorter than the average key position defender, but absolute animal one-on-one, and obviously a fantastic captain as well. And Jeremy McGovern is probably our best defender since then. A multitude of All-Australians, probably 3 or 4 off the top of my head, and been a wonderfully consistent player. Obviously had some injuries at the back end of his career, but clearly our best key position defender, I think, in that time. So happy with those. Happy to leave out Barrass McGovern. I have slotted Elliot Yeo in here. Now, this is cheating a little bit, but think about how many gun midfielders I have to fit into this team. There is 3 Brownlow medalists, let alone anyone else. But Elliot Yeo is also an All-Australian defender, a halfback flanker, and I've kind of made him third tall here. Shannon Hurn, obviously Premiership captain in 2018, and I think really hit his straps towards the age of 30. He was always a good player from his first season. I remember that running goal against the Brisbane Lions in 06. That was his first kick, I think, in the AFL. Pretty much since that moment, he's been a pretty damn good player, but I think 2017 to 2021, maybe, those were the best years of Shannon Hurn. Maybe even, you could say 2023, he was still pretty damn good. Pretty much a walk-up start. So then the other 2 halfback flankers. Brad Shepherd, okay, so he was pick 7 in 2009. Took a little while to get going. Played on a wing for a little bit there, then a bit of half-back, and I don't think we saw the best of Brad Shepherd till 2015 when we revolutionised the Weagles web. He found a role as an intercepting defender, probably a little bit of an undersized one, and just became an absolute gun for us for a while. Won All-Australian honours in, I think, going off the top of the head here, maybe 2020. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but he is an absolute jet. And then Beau Waters as well. I think he was the youngest man on the field in the 06 Premiership, battled some serious injury stuff, but a player that I probably should have mentioned in my 2011 video, but absolute hard nut, gun player. Probably the edges out guys like Drew Banfield for me, even Sam Butler, Liam Duggan. I think Beau Waters is the one I'd pick out of that lot. So we then get to the midfield, and it's actually quite easy, but obviously it's some stiff competition. So the on-ball division is literally just transplanted out of the 2006 Premiership. Dean Cox, best ever ruckman, Chris Judd, Ben Cousins, Daniel Kerr. There's 2 Brownlow medalists in there, with Daniel Kerr being 1 vote off a Brownlow medal. Chris Judd, arguably the best midfielder of all time. Arguably. I'm not making that claim right now, but he was so good. And we haven't had a midfielder since this team that is as good as even the weakest midfielder on the field here in Daniel Kerr. Let's talk about the wingman. I think Andrew Embley, seriously, with Andrew Gaff on the other wing. And I did this video the other day looking back on the 2011 season. It was amazing how many games I looked through where Embley had 30 possessions and 3 goals. He was so good that year, super quick. Don't forget also a Norm Smith medalist when he was actually in his prime, let alone at the end of his career. Could float forward, could run back hard and take intercept marks, absolute gun player. I would love an Andrew Embley on the list right now. And Andrew Gaff, obviously there's a little bit of talk as I record this straight after our round 1 loss against Port Adelaide. He's just been dropped, but deserves some respect as probably the other best wingman we've had since 2000, clearly. was probably our best player in 2018 up until, the Brayshaw incident. And for me personally as well, one thing is, like, as much criticism as there is around Gaff these days, I am grateful as an Eagles fan that he showed loyalty at the end of 18 and decided not to leave us. And obviously things didn't really work out, but I really respected that. I really appreciate that. And he clearly makes this team. Let's go with the forward line. Okay, Kennedy and Darling are clearly the two. Okay, Quinton Lynch is probably the next, but I still think there's a clear gap there. Darling's been All-Australian, 4-time leading goal kicker, and I think, by the time I record this, he might have gone past Sumich as the second leading goal kicker of all time for West Coast. And he may or may not get to 300 games, but that one I'm pretty comfortable with, and Josh Kennedy speaks for himself, one of our greatest ever players. So then let's start with the smalls in Lacroix and Matera. Lacroix, again, absolute gun. I think he's 4th in our all-time goal kicking. And what stands out about Lacroix was arguably his best seasons were when we were a rebuilding wooden spoon team. And that 12 goals he kicked against Essendon, obviously that's not enough on its own to get him into this team, but I really do think we've missed Lacroix since he retired in 2018. I remember thinking, we'll be all right without him, but, I don't think we were. And then Phil Matera as well, and again, probably one of the oldest players I'm going to pick in this team. He retired at the end of 2005. He's since said that he retired because he didn't get selected in that grand final, even though it was sort of reported at the time that he retired due to injury. He said to Woosha that he was going to be fit to play, and Woosha didn't pick him. He retired, missed out on the grand final the following year. But was our leading goal kicker for like 3 to 4 out of the 5 seasons leading up to 2005. Like, a lot of his best years still came after the year 2000. And I think he was an All-Australian in there as well. So I think as a pure crumbing small forward, don't think anyone else comes close to Phil Matera. Now let's talk about the half forwards, and I've gone with a couple of workman style forwards here. So Jamie Cripps, I think is one of our most underrated Eagles of this generation for sure. For the power of work he does in terms of defensive running and the fact that he can win games off his own boot. He's not like a superstar, but I can think of several games where Jamie Cripps, really stepped up to the plate, kicked a bag of 5 against the Bulldogs last year. I've seen him do that before. And I think probably a little bit underappreciated, and I think he's comfortably in this team, to be honest. And then Rowan Jones as well. Now, I've chucked him on a half-forward flank. I think that's where he started in the 06 grand final. I think he ran through the midfield too. A little bit of a divisive player. The sort of player who, when he got the ball, would kind of make mistakes, but at the same time, I think Chris Judd said that he was his favourite ever teammate because the amount of defensive work and blocking he did for Chris Judd. And I really think Rowan Jones is probably a little bit underrated and clearly makes this team. So then we get to the bench, and this is where we sort out a few of the others. And I've got 2 midfielders, a ruckman and a defender. So let me know what you think. I think Shuey and Pritis are the next best midfielders after all the star ones that I've mentioned post-2000. Personally, I think Shuey's probably the next best, but Pritis has also won a Brownlow medal. There's no way he doesn't make this team. And both of these guys, Shuey's a Norm Smith medalist. Like, they're fantastic and unlucky to be behind the greatest midfield I think the game has ever seen. But those guys I couldn't leave out of this team. I probably could have picked another forward. Nick Naitanui is second ruck. Again, too good to leave out. He's won 3 All-Australian jumpers. And I talked about it recently, whereas I don't think anyone other than Cox and Sandilands has bettered that or even equaled it. I could be wrong. Somebody told me that in the comments, and I believe that's got to be true. So 3 All-Australian jumpers, and he did 2 ACLs, missed heaps of football. An absolute club legend, Nick Naitanui, and he's just unlucky to be behind Dean Cox. And then for the defensive role there, I thought of a few. I think Drew Banfield is probably the one I'd pick here. Lewis Jetta was also a bit of a bolter for this role, but for a start, didn't play his whole career at West Coast. And I think after a few struggling years, he had some amazing ones. I think the best version of Jetta we saw was probably 2019. Like, there's highlights of some of his kickouts. He was absolutely unreal. But Banfield did it a bit longer. He's a premiership player in 94 and then was also there in 06 and was really good even still between 2000 and 06. So he gets the chocolates for me for that consistency. So we'll go through a couple of other honourable mentions here. Talked about Jetta. I've talked about Quinton Lynch. He might be the next, well, he clearly is the next best key forward out of this team and decided not to go with 3 talls. Adam Hunter probably as well, on the basis that the stats don't really tell the story with Adam Hunter, but he was an amazing swingman. Like, you could just put him forward, and we did it in the 05 grand final. We did it against the Cats in that amazing comeback game. And while stats might not tell the story, I think he's an honourable mention for this team. Liam Ryan's also won an All-Australian jumper, which should automatically put you close. But I prefer Cripps and Rowan Jones for length of contribution, and maybe Wirapunda as well. Again, just a little bit unlucky. Like, I couldn't leave out Beau Waters. I couldn't leave out Brad Shepherd and Drew Banfield. So I'm sure I'm forgetting players, but I think that's pretty much my 22 with some honourable mentions there. Like I said, You have Peter Matera, Glenn Jakovic as players who played during this era technically, but their contributions in that time, didn't really stack up that well. But they are still, in the top handful of greatest ever Eagles. So let me know in the comments as well, older fans, guys and girls who saw the 90s premierships and etc., what players come into this team? Now, I'm going to have a guess at a few. Obviously, Matera, Jakovic. Brett Heddy also might find himself on a half-forward flank. He was fantastic. I've seen highlights of him, but again, I didn't watch him play. There's Kemp, there's Mainwaring, there's McKenna, there's Woosha, and there's Sumich as well. Sumich, by far, had the most goals per game. He'd probably come into this team. Whether you keep Darling in the forward pocket, I'm not too sure, but let me know, because I really don't know, say, in particular the mids, like Kemp and Mainwaring, how do they compare to Shuey and Prudis? I mean, I've heard some fans say that they're clearly better, but I don't know how much of that is romanticising, so just let me know. Anyway, guys, that is my Eagles best 22 since the year 2000. Look forward to hearing from you in the comments. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.